Less than 1 week, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, you really did not hear that wrong. Just less than 7 days ago, we witnessed one of the most sensitive and highly anticipated royal family reunions taking place entirely behind closed doors. A meeting at the Highgrove estate between King Charles, Queen Camilla, Harry, Meghan, and their children, with a fierce promise: absolute secrecy. Buckingham Palace kept that promise. Not a single camera got in. There was no official statement or leak from the palace. The royal family fulfilled all commitments, completely locking down information to provide absolute silence for the couple who constantly cry out for privacy and safety in the media. But how long did that dead silence last? The answer is that it was mercilessly torn apart, and ironically, that privacy was not broken by paparazzi or prying British journalists, but seemed to come from the insiders themselves. Suddenly, the famous People magazine released an exclusive cover story, exposing every corner of emotion, every secret thought, and even the sadness and humiliation of Meghan Markle. These incredibly detailed pieces of information spilled out onto the pages like a pre-prepared script. The promise of silence was mercilessly trampled. The British royal family was once again dragged into a media circus that they had tried their best to avoid. Privacy ultimately seems to be just a perfect cover to manipulate public opinion in Hollywood style. Do you think this is simply a coincidence when the information leaked out? Or is it actually a meticulously calculated media move from beforehand? Please comment number 1 below if you think this is a blatant setup, or comment number 2 if you believe Meghan is truly a pitiful victim in this story. And to clearly understand why this information leak is an extremely dangerous and brazen move, we need to revisit exactly what was agreed upon from the beginning, where the British royal family had truly set up such a solid wall of protection. Let us turn back time a few days before this information leak bomb exploded, so we can see the whole picture most clearly. The context of the British royal family at that time was an atmosphere of extreme tension, fueled by a relentless media campaign from across the ocean. For many exhausting months before the trip, the American public and the whole world were constantly stuffed with information about Prince Harry, intensely fearing for the safety of himself and his family when setting foot back in the United Kingdom. Through a series of television interviews, legal documents submitted to the court, and even whispers from close sources, they skillfully painted a scenario of an England full of danger. The picture was dramatically woven to the point that stepping onto the airport runway was described as a life-or-death mission, a gamble with fate. Precisely because of these incessant cries about danger and the right to protection, the family meeting at the Highgrove private estate was set up by Buckingham Palace with a security and privacy standard that could be said to be so strict and tight that it was 100% absolute. The Queen and Prince Charles at that time, now King Charles, implicitly sent a strong message. If they wanted privacy and safety, the royal family would give them the most absolute privacy and safety that a nation could provide. There were no public events scheduled. There was no waving to royal fans standing along the streets. There were no carefully prepared diplomatic smiles behind the steering wheel or media lenses. Everything around Highgrove was strictly locked down like an impenetrable fortress. There is a practical detail, an incredibly shocking number that few people noticed in this entire movement campaign. There were exactly 20 luxury cars and security vehicles entering the private estate area of the King and Queen. These 20 cars were not simply means of transportation. They worked in coordination to form a perfect mobile barrier, a giant steel smokescreen rolling on the quiet streets. And ingeniously hidden somewhere inside that pitch-black car fleet were Harry, Meghan, along with the 2 children Archie and Lilibet. This security arrangement was so sophisticated, overwhelming and highly tactical that hundreds of photojournalists and veteran paparazzi crowding outside the Highgrove gates were left completely empty-handed in astonishment. Despite the frantic tailing efforts, the extremely long telephoto lenses pointing straight at every passing car, not a single silhouette, not an angle of a face, not a single flash of light from a camera could penetrate the bulletproof black glass windows of those cars. That was an absolute victory in terms of scene control by the palace. They proved to the world that when the British royal family wants to keep a secret, they can create a wall that no one can pierce. More importantly, the palace completely controlled the public opinion narrative through the most classic power tactic, saying nothing at all. They were absolutely silent. And that is exactly the definition, the true meaning of the privacy that the Sussexes always crave, or at least that they loudly declared to the media that they crave. To actualize this solid wall of silence, Buckingham Palace enforced an unshakable iron rule. Absolutely no official photographs of this family reunion would be released. This was not an accident or omission by the communications team, but an extremely sharp strategic move. There would be no historic group shots on the Buckingham Palace balcony, no delicately staged family portraits in front of the Highgrove living room fireplace, and absolutely no public embrace between the king and the exiled son to confirm a smooth reconciliation to the world. This photographic silence was in fact a heavy blow, completely shattering the core strategy of the PR machine named the Sussexes. Why was this move by the royal family so highly damaging? Because it completely cut off the visual resource, the most precious and powerful currency in their media world. You must understand that, for Meghan and Harry, images alongside senior members of the royal family are the guarantee certificates for their value in Hollywood. The reunion actually took place. People with royal blood sat down together, but the royal family adamantly refused to package that sacred moment into an event of a glorious return nature for Harry and Meghan. There was not a single victorious, radiant photo for Meghan to bring back to her multi-million-dollar mansion in Montecito, California, and use as an ultimate weapon for her subsequent name-polishing campaigns on streaming platforms or as evidence for lucrative memoirs. There was no photographic evidence for them to prove to American tycoons and the global elite that they are still the holders of the highest privileges, still the ones pampered and favored by King Charles, to stand in the same frame. Buckingham Palace simply provided a safe, enclosed space for a literal family gathering. By doing this, they completely eliminated all commercial elements, stripped away all PR schemes, and extinguished all media calculations from the equation of family affection. King Charles, Queen Camilla, and the loyal royal staff system sat there, patiently, keeping their word of honor. They did not reveal even a single word, a sigh of the king or even the smallest gesture of the queen to the outside world. The castle excellently fulfilled its mission of keeping all family secrets strictly inside its ancient stone walls. Even in those few short days, everyone, from royal analysts to the most loyal fans, held a naive belief that, finally, the Sussexes had learned the true value of silence. Everyone thought that after so many storms, they knew how to respect the mutual agreement, accept stepping back, and cherish the rare peace of the family. But the truth is always more brutal, calculating, and cruel than we can imagine. When glamorous photos could not be captured, when royal images could not be used as a sharp weapon to maintain heat in the headlines, emotions and intentionally molded stories would immediately be released to fill that power vacuum. And that is exactly when a familiar magazine appeared, playing the role of an effective spokesperson to change the entire landscape of this fiery media chessboard. Everything changed dizzyingly in just the blink of an eye. The promise of an absolute silence that seemed to have been sealed with iron and steel, but in reality, it was as fragile as a piece of paper. Just as the reunion event at Highgrove had not yet settled, just as the public was still amazed at the masterful information lockdown capability of Buckingham Palace, a media bomb was dropped. The famous American People magazine released an exclusive article, prominently taking up the entire front cover. For general audiences, this might just be ordinary entertainment news. But for those who regularly follow royal stories and clearly understand how the PR machine works in Hollywood, People magazine is not unfamiliar at all. It is not an independent investigative newspaper. It is like a semi-official mouthpiece, a friendly PR bulletin board, a media backyard that the Sussexes have utilized many times to shape public opinion to their will. Whenever this couple needs a safe space to tell their story without being twisted or questioned, they go to People. And this time, The cover article did not provide blurry, candid photos from paparazzi. They did not have photos, because, as we know, the king's security wall did its job too well. Instead, the article was filled with a series of detailed quotes from individuals called by an extremely familiar label, anonymous sources close to the couple. How ridiculous and ironic. Let us pause for a moment to use the most basic logical thinking. Who is close enough to clearly know every emotional heartbeat, every sigh, and the deepest thoughts of Meghan Markle behind closed doors, strictly guarded at Highgrove? Not a single royal staff member would dare to open their mouth. King Charles and Queen Camilla even less so. So who could provide this chillingly detailed information, if not the couple themselves, or the multi-million-dollar PR team they are paying monthly in California? This article is actually not just a sensational piece of news, it is a blatant and calculated trampling on the confidentiality agreement established with King Charles. Instead of letting this rare family gathering pass peacefully, instead of respecting the private space that the elderly father painstakingly prepared for his son, the article began to pour out sappy, tearful descriptions of the psychological state of Meghan. It describes her feeling extremely sad and deeply hurt. It paints the picture of a devoted wife, claiming that she desperately longed to be by his side to support Harry on his trip back to his homeland, but was hindered by harsh security issues. The article even deliberately uses the word humiliated to describe the feeling of Meghan when she had to witness the public noise, the negative gossip surrounding this trip of the family. But let us look straight at the truth and expose this contradiction. Why is Meghan the humiliated one? They should have had a completely secret trip if they really wanted to. Who leaked the information about their flight from the very beginning? History has proven it was her team, the giant PR machine in America, who proactively fired the first shot into public opinion. They themselves arbitrarily sent notices to their favored journalists that the entire Sussex family would fly to England. They themselves deliberately turned a personal family visit into a shocking global event. They ignited the fire of public opinion themselves, and then when the public opinion burned too large, getting out of control and not following the desired flattering script, they went on the papers to play the victims, feeling humiliated by the heat of the very fire they created. Through the article of People, a series of aching questions from the public seemed to be answered. But please make no mistake, that is not the objective truth being exposed, but rather blatantly manipulative words. The article paves the way and meticulously explains the reason why Meghan did not appear publicly at the Invictus Games countdown event with her husband. They put all the blame on the troubles regarding accommodation arrangements and the lack of security protection, an excuse that sounds reasonable but is completely hollow. Because the plain truth is that they were provided with the highest, most solid level of protection by Buckingham Palace as previously agreed. There was not any sudden change in security, nor was there any real threat left open by the palace, as this magazine deliberately wove to deceive readers. The instigation to release these private details to the press less than 1 week after the meeting shows a terrifying rush. It irrefutably proves that this couple, or more precisely the Sussex brand machine, cannot endure the lack of attention. In the survival world of Hollywood, silence is not peace. Silence is the death of fame. When the palace stripped away the visual weapon, preventing them from having powerful photos to sell for fame, they were forced to sell something else, the personal story. When they could not control the authoritative press releases of Buckingham Palace, they turned to using anonymous articles in entertainment magazines to regain ownership of the narrative. At all costs, they had to turn themselves into the center of a noisy media play, even though in reality, during this event, the British royal family only wanted them to be silent attendees in the family, and the script meticulously written in People magazine is not simply a clumsy vindication. It is an extremely sophisticated move, a systematically calculated media chess piece aimed at re-establishing and consolidating an image that is all too familiar to the public, the image of a victim who always has to suffer countless disadvantages. Throughout the entire leaked article in People magazine, if you subtly analyze each layer of words, you will realize there is an extremely sophisticated message repeated many times over. This message is carefully packaged by the PR team under the guise of deep sympathy and understanding. Meghan always lets Harry take the lead when facing his family. At first hearing, this saying paints in the mind of the public the image of a gentle, enduring, and purely selfless wife. It creates a picture of a woman ready to step back, standing firmly in the rear to support her pillar husband in solving historically complex family troubles. According to this script, Meghan is an obedient wife, accepting to stay behind the wings, silently swallowing her tears to endure the humiliation and extreme sadness when she could not stand side by side with her husband, simply because of some invisible, harsh security barriers imposed by the palace. But ladies and gentlemen, if we boldly peel off that glamorous, sappy layer of words heavily imbued with the Hollywood substance, we will see a completely different truth, a cold, ruthless, and highly calculating media strategy aimed at completely shaking off all personal responsibility. Let us recall the image that Meghan Markle has always painstakingly built for herself in the American market. She always appears on podcasts and forums as an independent, strong woman, an activist for the rights of women, a person who always masters her own voice and life. So why suddenly, in the story with the British royal family, does she unexpectedly shrink into a small, obedient wife letting her husband lead? By stuffing this saying into the head of public opinion through anonymous sources, Meghan has single-handedly created a perfect emergency exit for herself, a golden life preserver for any scenario that could happen. The calculation here reaches a master level. Let us try to put two hypotheses on the scale. The first hypothesis: if this royal reunion at Highgrove was a great success, if hugs were exchanged and a new era of peace was opened between the two shores of the ocean, the public would certainly hail her as a solid rear guard, a mature woman who knows how to sacrifice personal pride to heal family rifts. But let us look at the second hypothesis, which is the reality that happens more frequently. If this meeting collapses, if the dividing abysses become even wider, if new quarrels break out again, or if, in the future, King Charles and the British royal family completely slam the door on them, then, at that time, whose fault will it be? Certainly, 100%, it is not Meghan Markle, because, according to what the article carefully sewed into the minds of readers, Prince Harry is the one taking the lead, the one directly negotiating and solving all problems. Meghan merely plays the role of a naive passenger, an outsider trapped in the toxic family disaster of someone else. If there is any media incident or breakdown happening behind those closed doors, she can easily wash her hands of it, keep her designer outfit free of a single speck of dust, and smile, telling the world that she handed over full decision-making power to her husband to handle. That is not only an explanation, that is an absolute risk-hedging move aimed at protecting her flawless personal reputation in America, ensuring that her brand never has to take responsibility for the failures of the Sussexes when confronting Buckingham Palace. In addition, her complete absence at public events in England during that sensitive week was not at all a coincidence due to scheduling, but a meticulous calculation down to every second. Let us recall the actual context at that time. Right before the trip, Prince Harry had just suffered a humiliating, bitter, and extremely expensive defeat in a London court in the lawsuit against a major British press corporation. The public and the press of the foggy country at that time were pointing thousands of sharp spearheads at him, mocking his legal arguments. The hostile atmosphere was something that could be clearly felt. Meghan Markle, a person always obsessed with perfectly controlling her public image, clearly never wanted to stand in the same frame and be associated with someone bearing the label of a loser in the middle of a media storm. She chose the safest way, staying in the lavish mansion in California, letting Harry fly back to England alone to endure the axes of public opinion, facing the probing gazes all by himself, solely answering the tough questions and single-handedly confronting the charity events where they were supposed to stand side by side as the salt and pepper symbol they once proudly declared. And as soon as the storm in England showed signs of temporarily subsiding, the PR machine was immediately started. The familiar anonymous sources simultaneously appeared on American newspapers to recount, explaining that she cried, was extremely sad, had a burning desire to be there to hold the hand of her husband, but could not because she was deprived of her security rights. She ingeniously turned her calculated absence into a forced pain. Instead of being criticized as a wife abandoning her husband in a difficult time, dodging media risks, she put on the cloak of a woman trapped by ironic circumstances. From someone who did not appear for even a single second before the British public, Meghan once again manipulated the situation, dominating all major and minor news headlines, turning the reunion of Harry into a story about her own sadness. Clearly, that is not pure weakness or vulnerability. It is the capability of a master in media strategy manipulation, knowing how to turn nothingness into massive attention. And to better understand the deep extent of these calculations, that manipulation of public opinion becomes even more clear and ridiculous when we look at how Prince Harry himself reacts to the media in two completely different environments. On one side is the hostility, tight-lipped nature in the United Kingdom, and on the other side is the endless ostentation and flashiness in the country of America. The biggest, most ridiculous, and also the most fatal flaw in this entire long-running drama lies precisely in the inconsistent attitude of Prince Harry. For many years, he has personally molded and built for himself a lucrative personal brand, an image nailed into the public mind, the image of a man full of psychological trauma caused by the media. He constantly files lawsuits everywhere, ready to burn millions of dollars on persistent and sometimes useless legal battles in London, just to try to prove to the whole world that camera flashes are ghosts, the most terrifying obsession of his life. Whenever he sets foot back in the United Kingdom, Harry always puts on an extremely tense face. He always frowns, looking around with a vigilant gaze, as if there is an invisible threat, a sniper, or some terrible disaster waiting to swallow his family. He constantly talks about the pressure weighing heavily on his shoulders, about his safety being threatened every minute and every second, and especially emphasizes the ruthless hostility of the press in the foggy country. From that meticulously directed perspective, everything in the United Kingdom means danger to him, with psychological traumas that have never healed. But ladies and gentlemen, open your eyes wide and look at what actually happened just a few short days after the week strictly protected by the palace, the week that the Sussex side described as full of tension and humiliation. We are entering the days of July 2026, a time when many landmark changes are taking place, and also the time when the true face of these PR campaigns is most clearly exposed. Right after leaving the dangerous England, Harry flew back to America, and immediately, like a miracle, he appeared gorgeously at a prestigious red carpet sports event in central New York. There was no Meghan Markle accompanying to take the lead. There was no fearful, cringing withdrawal in front of a forest of lenses pointing straight at his face. Completely the opposite, Harry stepped out onto the red carpet with an extremely radiant face, a bright smile blooming on his lips. He was extremely comfortable posing, changing postures continuously, so the cameramen could get the best angles, and even lingered to happily chat and joke with the paparazzi. In a jaw-dropping moment for many, Harry loudly praised the photographers in New York as the most polite, wonderful, and kind people he had ever met. This attitude of eagerly enjoying the limelight completely contradicts and slaps the image of a pitiful victim obsessed with scrutiny that he had just deliberately acted out in England only a few days prior. What happened to the psychological traumas? Where did the deadly danger suddenly evaporate to? The extreme fear of camera flashes disappeared into nothingness so fast that the public did not even have time to blink. What is the core difference here exactly? The answer is incredibly simple, yet it strips bare the entire nature of the Sussex machine. The problem was never that they hated the media or held a grudge against public opinion like what they always preach. The media is the oxygen for them to survive in Hollywood. The real problem is, they only hate the kind of media that they cannot manipulate and control. When standing on the glowing red carpet in New York, where they are surrounded by cheers, flattered with harmless questions, and absolutely not pressured by interrogations digging deep into the truth or the contradictions in their words, the media suddenly becomes their closest, most wonderful friends in the world. The camera flashes at this moment are no longer a nightmare ghost, but a brilliant light illuminating their power. However, when facing a British royal family that resolutely keeps its doors closed, a place that refuses to provide them with powerful joint photos to promote themselves, or when facing independent investigative journalists who dare to ask tough questions about the costs of the lawsuits, about the truth behind the baseless accusations, the media is immediately labeled as a toxic enemy, as inhumane monsters. This brazen double standard is the strongest evidence showing the hypocrisy and deception in their campaign, crying out for privacy all along. They constantly say that they want to heal family relationships, want a peaceful life without storms, but their hands continuously sign million-dollar contracts, relentlessly draining and making money from those very tearful conflicts. Having a hand in leaking top-secret information from Highgrove to People magazine is just the newest, clearest proof showing a cruel truth. For them, there is no sacred family moment, no honorary agreement with the elderly father that cannot be sold out, converted into cheap, sensational articles to maintain heat and popularity in the headlines. All moral boundaries can be blurred, as long as it serves their personal brand machine to keep rolling. And when trust is continuously sold cheaply time and time again, in exchange for sensational headlines, for hollow applause on entertainment newspaper pages, the real price to pay for the future of this couple will be much more expensive than they can ever imagine. This reunion at Highgrove in July 2026 could have been a truly solid foundation, a golden opportunity to rebuild the shattered trust between the Sussexes and the British royal family after all those storms. Just imagine, if they could control their thirst for the media, keeping everything completely secret behind those closed doors for a few months, or at least just a few short weeks, then perhaps the door of reconciliation would have truly begun to open. A respectful silence would be the clearest proof showing they are serious about healing the family. But instead, reality is always more brutal. Less than 7 days passed, every most private emotion, every tiniest detail in that sensitive meeting was leaked straight out to the papers. What is the real purpose? Entirely just to serve the name-polishing process and maintain the personal attention of Meghan. True privacy always requires an iron discipline and absolute restraint. And discipline, ironically enough, is exactly what this couple always severely lacks. We must understand a truth that the British royal family is not blind, and they are certainly not foolish. The senior figures at Buckingham Palace have been masters of image management over many centuries. When the palace bitterly realizes that all their sincere and immense efforts to protect an absolutely safe personal space for Harry and Meghan ultimately just get taken advantage of, turned into cheap material for a sensational magazine article touting self-pity, then do they still have any reason to be lenient? Why must King Charles risk opening the doors of his residence for this couple one more time, constantly pulling strings behind the scenes? Leaking information to play the pitiful victims is permanently not a weakness. It is actually an extremely cold and ruthless media strategy. But there is one thing they miscalculated. This short-sighted strategy is single-handedly destroying the very last, most fragile connection they have left with their royal roots. And ironically, that very royal connection is the only thing that truly brings attraction, power, and money to the Sussex name at the present moment. The media industry is inherently very heartless. The sensational stories on the cover will quickly fade away when a new rumor appears. The sad emotions, the tears, or the humiliation carefully painted on the newspapers today will also be forgotten by the public tomorrow. However, the betrayal of trust will not. The betrayal between flesh and blood will leave a scar for a very long time, perhaps even forever indelible. So, in your opinion, the wise audience following this story, is this truly a smart media move to protect their image, or a deadly mistake completely cutting off their own way back. Please leave your sharp opinions right below in the comments section, and do not forget to press the subscribe button for the channel so we can continue to accompany each other in exposing the dramatically hidden stories behind the royal curtain.